So welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. We're talking about managing data privacy while managing records. If you do not know us, my name is Jen Nelson. I'm the VP of Strategic Solutions at Valora Technologies, and joining me is Sandy Surkis, who is co-founder and CEO of Valora Technologies. We are number 2 in our 2025 webinar series today. This year, we're talking about a lot of topics that are really top of mind for folks in the information governance industry. So today we're talking about data privacy, but I invite you to go to our new website on valoratech.com to look for past webinars and also to register for upcoming webinars. We're talking about a lot of AI and AI readiness, talking about how to implement AI and auto-classification for structured data. So there's a lot of things that we're covering this year. So again, I would welcome you to hop online and check it out there. For those of you who are new to Valora, just a little bit about what we do. We are 25 years in business this year. We provide an information governance platform that leverages auto-classification technology and machine learning algorithms to help automate the scanning, the discovery, the classification, and also the defensible disposition of content across the enterprise, regardless of where it lives. And we're used mostly by data governance teams, records manager teams, legal compliance teams, and it really brings all of your data from these kind of these different repositories into one single pane of glass view. And we have found over the last 25 years, as the sophistication and needs of the IG industry has grown and evolved, so has our solution. So not only do we bring in multiple repositories into one view, but we're also bringing together multiple use cases, because it used to be that information governance and records management was kind of synonymous with, find the thing, preserve the thing, eventually destroy the thing. But we know now that all corporate data, not just records, need to be handled and managed and identified properly throughout their life cycle, while accounting for things like e-discovery, legal hold, data security, AI readiness, and certainly data privacy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's ultimately what Valora brings to the table, is not only this kind of single pane of glass view into all the content, but the ability to defensively manage all of these different use cases in a single platform. So that's a little bit about us, a little bit about you. So when you were registering for the webinar, we asked kind of what are your interests and kind of who's here today. So joining us today are mostly folks in the records and information management practice, some in knowledge management, some in compliance and legal and data privacy. So welcome. And what were your interests and kind of what are your priorities for this year in information governance, in your information governance practice? And there was a lot of file cleanup and rot reduction, a lot of automating manual processes that you're currently using, managing retention policies, and the OMG everything bucket is usually a popular one. So you're in good company today. We are going to be talking about managing records, how to automate those things, how to get rid of the stuff we don't need, and then of course, certainly how data privacy and managing records go hand in hand. So before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. So I've got the Q&A open on the Teams chat here. So please feel free to ask as we go. We'll certainly have a Q&A session at the end, but I encourage you, if you think of it, go ahead and put it in the chat. Sandy and I will be speaking. When one of us isn't speaking, we'll be looking at the Q&A. So we have no problem interrupting each other to ask questions. So please feel free to do that. After the fact, you will get a copy of the recording and a copy of the slides as well. And of course, we would love your feedback on this session and anything else you might like to see for this upcoming webinar series. All right, so let's get into it. What we're going to cover today is, again, managing data privacy while managing records. So we're going to cover what is data privacy or why should I even care, how to manage records and data privacy under a SimilarOne initiative. We're going to talk about managing data subject access requests, because that's something that's coming that we're going to need to be doing in most states. And spoiler alert, Valora and auto-classification is your friend when it comes to this. And we'll talk about how to advocate for an organization-wide approach to data privacy. So it's not just one person or one team's problem. And then, of course, how to get started and what that looks like. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Sandy.
Okay, great. I'm just following along with my own copy of the slides here. So hopefully most of you on this call today know what data privacy is, but just in case you don't, or you're looking for a definition, you need to maybe explain it to other folks in your organization. Here you go. And most of the kind of definitions tend to come from GDPR, which is the regulation out of Europe, kind of the leading voice on data privacy, at least in the beginning. Now there are many voices, but that's where a lot of the terminology and the concepts come from. But one of the key things to know in data privacy is kind of whose point of view are we talking about? Data privacy tends to be described in terms of the rights of the individual, the customer, the patient, the employee, sometimes the supplier. So it's the rights that those people or those entities have over their own personal or sensitive information. However, there is a flip side of that, which is what are the obligations of the organizations that hold that data or have collected that data knowingly or unknowingly? Put a pin in that when we get to AI. And so there are, just like these people have rights around their data, the organizations that are holding that data or collecting that data or using that data have obligations to the people whose data it actually is. Okay, Jen.
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Sometimes, and we still are seeing this, not quite as much as when it first kind of started a few years ago, is people getting confused between the notion of data privacy and data security. So we want to kind of level set here. Data security is sort of the older concept, and that is, you'll sometimes hear about DLP, data loss prevention. Data security is essentially locking down your organization. Think of things like a firewall or different types of gates that prevent content from moving across, like preventing you from emailing something sensitive. You can't send it as an attachment, or you can't log into XYZ place because you don't have permission. Those are data security things, and they tend to be set at the kind of the filed folder or the network boundary level. Data privacy is one level deeper. Data privacy is actually about the nature or the content of the file. What does it say? And so you may have access to this area, but the information contained in the file is sensitive. It contains someone's social security number. It contains trade secrets. So that is the fundamental difference between security, which again is kind of at the folder level at best, and data privacy, which is down within the file level or even sub-file, even just specific lines or words of content. And you can compare those side by side here. I found a lot of this discussion to be very helpful from an organization called the Storage Networking Industry Association. That's SNIA. If you're looking for ways to explain this to people, that website was incredibly helpful. And if you're not already familiar with IAPP, I hope people coming to learn about data privacy do know IAPP, but if you don't, that's the International Association of Privacy Professionals. They're very active on LinkedIn. They have tremendous information on their websites. If privacy has suddenly just landed in your lap as an information governance practitioner, get to know IAPP. Mm-hmm. We'll have more to say on them in a moment.
That's right. Stay tuned.
Okay, so last year, I think, I gave a presentation on the 4Ds of data privacy, and it was very well received. People are very interested in this. It's a helpful way to remember what they all are. And Jen, you can just put all four of them out. So data privacy, we just covered. Data privacy is sort of the umbrella term, but there are other things that are very tightly associated with data privacy, and it's important that you know what they are. So data minimization is essentially a practice to have only the minimum amount of data that you need to conduct the task at hand. So things like if you are collecting data from a customer, from an employee, from a patient, you only collect exactly what is needed to fulfill the function that you've collected it for in the first place. And that covers both what you say to the party that you're getting information from. In other words, that's called the basis. We're going to come back to basis, the basis on which you're collecting it, and then the kind of informing them how you will be using it, why you will be using it, how long you will be using it, and what are the kind of terms and conditions for the disposition or the disposal of that data. So data minimization, it's kind of like you've probably heard of the term least privilege. It's always using the very smallest amount of data shared with the very fewest number of people to accomplish the task. That's data minimization. Data provenance is just kind of a fancy word for where did this data come from? And really what they mean is, can we trust it? Okay, so who provided this data? Under what circumstances? Did we buy it off the internet, or did we collect this ourselves? Were we honest in the collection? Did we share with the collected from party, why we're using this data? So all of that kind of falls under provenance. And that also plays a really big role when we get into AI, because the whole point about provenance is, again, that undercurrent of, is it trustworthy? That plays a big role in AI, which already has some trust issues. Well, again, we'll cover more of that later. And then data lineage, you'll hear that chucked out, and it often kind of goes hand in hand with data provenance. The difference is data lineage, think of data lineage like a flow chart. That's why I have the arrows there. It's basically, how does data, the same piece of data, let's say, the employee social security number, how does that flow through the organization? And data lineage is often represented through flow charts or, pictorially with arrows and things like that. And that's important for people that are doing data transformation. Think of your data science teams or your analytical teams. They are kind of transforming data as it moves throughout, and they're bigger users of data lineage, more so than information governance. In fact, that takes us to the next slide, which is which are the ones we really care about. Yes, we care about data privacy, but really what we care about is data minimization. Only having the amount of data, the minimum amount of data that we need to be able to conduct our business. So that kind of, if you put a data minimization mindset on, you will automatically kind of achieve data privacy. And then data provenance, again, is, where did this come from? Was it gotten legitimately? Can I trust this data? Has it been tampered with? Has it been altered? That is going to kind of set up a lot of the data lineage as well. So that's why I blacked out those two. If you focus on these two, you're going to check the boxes you need to check as an IG professional. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mentioned lawful basis. That's kind of the legal terminology. I am not a lawyer, and I'm definitely not your lawyer, but lawful basis is the terminology that you will hear, which is sort of fancy talk for why. Why do you have this data? Why did you collect it? Why are you analyzing it? Why are you using it? Maybe a little bit of how are you using it? Why do you still have it? And if the answer is because nobody could be bothered to get rid of it, that is not a good answer. You might have gotten away with that, with, well, it was rot, meh, big deal, nobody cared. People really care. They care to the point of sanctions and fines when you get into data privacy and data minimization regulation. So the lawful basis is really important. And you can think of it just like for records folks, you're used to this concept because when you make your records retention schedule, you will have a citation that says, why are you storing this document in this manner and for this period of time? You have the citation that says law, federal law, blah, 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 says we have to do it. Here's the citation. So that is your lawful basis. You may not use those words, but that's your lawful basis for storing that record in that manner. So now we take that one level down, which is, why are you storing or using or collecting or reporting on the nature of the data in that record or that non-record? The lawful basis is essentially either the policy or the requirement that you need it for XYZ. So one of the suggestions that we have for all of you is, in your records retention schedule or in your data lifecycle management policies, you add a column or you add an area for lawful basis that indicates why you have something and under what terms and conditions you will remove it. So again, if you have more questions on that, obviously you can reach out to us, but this is becoming a really big deal because you're required to prove your lawful basis if you get challenged in a data privacy challenge. In other words, there's a whistleblower, somebody kind of calls you before one of the regulating agency, you will need to provide your lawful basis. So think ahead, start laying that out, and then start doing your retention and your data management in accordance with the lawful basis. The ones below there, by the way, these are each one of these kind of pretty pictures on the bottom, these are legitimate reasons. These are the bases under which you may keep the data. We all know legal hold, that would be that third one there. There are other, kind of legitimate reasons that you have it. Again, you want to be able to explain which of the lawful bases and when any one document or file responds to probably more than one of these bases. If you don't have the ability to do that easily, start thinking about auto-classification. Obviously, we're going to get to that one in a minute, but that is how you make the connection. Sorry, go ahead, Jen. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you haven't been following data privacy regulations, fortunately, there are whole organizations that do that for you, IAPP being one of them. There's been a lot of activity, as I said, GDPR in 2018. In case you are unaware, GDPR is live and has been live throughout the pandemic and beyond. And it really set the bar by which we are attempting to do privacy regulation in the United States. I am sorry to report, as I do every single year, that we still have no federal law for data privacy in the United States. And given the current administration and let's just say their approach to things, we're not gonna, okay? And so it is left on to states to be able to protect their citizens. And that is exactly what we've seen happening. California really led the way with CCPA, but many other states are coming on board and it's just going to continue to roll out. Thank you. Here's a great chart. This comes from IAPP. So you can just at a glance kind of see the status. Look for the green. The green means that that state has a signed law around data privacy. We're almost at half the country now. And we have a bunch of them coming online in 2025. So in January, 6 more states went live with their data privacy regulation. In July, just a couple months, we have 3 more coming online. And then next January, we have 3 more coming online that we know about. It is possible that any one of these blue or dark blue, looking at you, Georgia, are going to go green in that same time frame. That will, when those come online, they will put us over the halfway mark in the United States. So what that means is we have at least 25 different, slightly different data privacy regulations that we have to be aware of and comply with, and no real federal guidance on that. So if you are interested in this and you'd like to know exactly which types of rights, and we'll talk about that again in a second, that is the rights that the individuals have about their data. So different states have different flavors of those rights. Again, you can go to IAPP. They have this fabulous chart that will track it all for you. And again, if you are looking for that citation, you'll see the statute or the bill. And if you're looking for the legal basis, you can find that terminology right here. If somebody has the right to edit their own data, that becomes the basis by which you might want to maintain it so that you can execute on that subject access request when it comes in. I will point out, oh, sorry, Jen, just go back for one second. Once upon a time, there was a sort of a sense out in InfoGov world and in records management that e-discovery was someone else's problem. I think we have put that to bed by now. It is everybody's problem, and it is definitely an InfoGov and records and information problem, because you are the one they're coming to when they say, I need to produce XYZ. Where do I go? Where do I look? How do I know I got everything? The exact same thing is going to happen with data privacy if it hasn't already. And I alluded to this in my comment on LinkedIn. I'd be really interested to know how many of you have had essentially data privacy dropped in your lap in the last, let's say, 18 to 24 months and been told, now it's your problem, records folks, or now it's your problem, information governance folks. Take on privacy, thanks so much, no extra budget, no extra staff. So if that is you, you give us a little thumbs up or a heart or whatever it is you want to do in the commentary. But we're hearing that more and more. And so one of the things that I would suggest to you all is that this is actually a spectacular opportunity to show an incredible return on investment. We're going to get into that a little bit more, but data privacy and records and information governance are very nicely dovetailed. Okay, Jen. All right, so let's talk about traditional records management. Why are you unable, or why were you unable to delete ROT? I hear a lot of excuses, and I see when I go out into, and see you all in person, I see a lot of sheepishness like this. And the real answer is because no one will let you delete anything. You know it needs to be deleted. They know it needs to be deleted, and nobody will let you actually conduct let you pull the trigger. So Jen, you can just flip through these. So, and honestly, there's no real penalty to just keeping it forever. Yes, it violated the records retention schedule. Yes, it costs more to store. Storage is cheap. Okay, those were the penalties. Those days are over. As soon as data privacy enters the equation, there are major penalties, major consequences for keeping data that you should not be keeping. What do I mean by that? Data that someone has let's say a customer or a patient, has explicitly asked you to forget about them. If you are still keeping that, you are in violation of the regulations. And if somebody can prove that you knowingly did that, by the way, negligence, you just didn't know, you didn't realize, that doesn't count. That counts as knowingly keeping it. The fact that you don't actually know what you have, that doesn't fly. If you're holding it, it counts. And so if you do that, you are now out of compliance. Now, what's the big deal? Tell them the big deal, Jen.
The big deal is real actual penalties. And when we talk about, GDPR and compliance and their fines, it's a little abstracted because we're not talking about things on this continent. But I was looking for a laundry list of, the biggest penalties, and it's just like, it's billions of dollars, right? What does that even mean to a business like businesses like ours? So the biggest one in the US so far has been the one against Meta, and that was for the unlawful collection of biometric data. But when you look at the actual dollars in penalties, the CCPA has a range between 25 and 7,500 per individual violation. So if you have 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 100,000, that's what you're looking at per violation. And CPA that just came into effect as well in Colorado, they have between 2,000 and 20,000 per individual violation. And not only that, but Colorado looks at it as a deceptive trade practice to be out of compliance with the Privacy Act. So there's not only the Privacy Act penalties, but then there's also business trade penalties on top of that as well, to a maximum of 500,000 per instance. So it's real. It's real, and companies are being penalized for this. So this is why, of course, it's top of mind. And as we saw in the last few slides ago, as all these state regulations come online, you're going to want to make sure that you are ahead of the game and you have a plan.
Jen, why don't you keep going?
Sure. So is it privacy? Is it records management? You tell us, who knows? So when you're looking at an organization's data privacy responsibilities, the people on the privacy or the compliance side are thinking, what sensitive data do we have and where is that sensitive data located? Who can access it? Are we handling it correctly? Is it in the right systems? Does it have the right access? Is anything accessible that maybe shouldn't be? And can I produce that information should a subject access request come in? Am I able to find that information and produce it in a timely fashion? And our friends in records management were thinking the same things. We're like, what do we have? Where is it located? Who has access to it? Are we handling it properly? What's accessible that maybe shouldn't be out there on the shared drive? And can I produce the relevant information when any other KM request is made? So we're saying and we're thinking the same things. And we often see, because we sit in a really interesting position, because we talk to many different companies doing things many different ways. And quite often we see the folks in the data privacy or compliance siloed with the folks in information governance. So we also encourage to kind of bridge that gap so that if there's data privacy conversations going on, that the information governance folks are involved, and certainly vice versa when you're looking to kind of tackle this together. Some things that we look for when we're looking for records management and records retention tags, we're looking for, is it raw? Do we need to keep it? Yes or no? Is it a duplicate? What's the expiration if it's a record? What is the record class? What is the retention period? How do we handle this once it's, come up past retention? How do we get rid of it? And the data privacy and the classification tags as well, we can add on to that, because if we're looking for information and data within our data stores for records purposes, we might as well look for it for data privacy purposes. And as we're doing that, we can say, does this record contain personal data? Yes or no? If so, what type is it? And how sensitive is it? How should we keep it? What purposes are we keeping it for? So as you're doing one thing, you might as well be doing another, because we're all looking at the same data and making the same decisions about it. And a great way to be able to do that and to visualize that is in some kind of analytics platform, spoiler alert, that Valora can help with as well, that visually you can say, in my entire data stores, what contains personal data and what doesn't? And of course, if it does, what kind is it? PII, PHI, or PCI? And if so, what is it? So if it's PII, it's a social security number, or if it's PHI, it's a patient record, or it's a doctor's note, a return to work note from HR. And if it's PCI, maybe it's a blank check or banking information. I can see my Canadian showing with my spelling of check.
It's adorable.
I have to check myself sometimes with my spelling.
We know what you're about. It's okay.
So when we're talking about DSARs, so that is data subject access requests, and that is an individual's right to ask about your data. Usually it's delete my data, but folks have the access or have the permissions under GDPR and CPA and CCPA and the other state regulations to, what do you have on me? Get rid of it if you do. What are you using my data for? I'd like to bring my data with me. Show me what I've opted in for. And if I have, why are you using this data? And show me the ways that you are using this data. So in an example where you get a request in from maybe a past customer, maybe a current customer, maybe a former employee to say, delete my data, there's a few groups that come into play here. There's the data privacy folks that say, hey, we just got a request in, we need to delete this guy's data, and you've got 30 days from now, go. And record says, sure. Let me just check my 30 systems, my 8 billion files, my 25 terabytes of data that I have under my purview, and just give me a sec. I'm just going to search for this guy's information. Oh, wait a second. Okay, I found some, but we can't delete them because they're records. We have to keep them for 7 years. Oh, wait a second. Some of the stuff also has other people's information on it. I can't delete it, or I can't share it with them because it has information that we can't share. And legal hold says, wait, we can't delete it because some of this stuff is under legal hold. So we have to keep it. So there's a lot of factors into, oh, let's just find it and delete it. Like we know that it is really not that easy. So privacy and records for that example must coexist, because how do those requests affect or interfere with the records management or the information governance practice? Because it can mess up the more normal, like, retention and the timing of the things. And, who wins in a potential boardroom brawl? Is it the records retention says, no, I need to keep this for 7 years? Is legal hold saying, well, I can't delete this under legal hold? Or is it the DSAR saying this person wants their information deleted? And it can, again, having that legal basis or that defensibility against why sorry, sir, we can't delete it because it's under legal hold or because it contains other customer data. Having that as well is helpful. And then the resolution outcomes are different in different jurisdictions. If you're getting a request from Colorado versus someone in California versus someone who might live in London, it depends. So having a system or a process or a series of processes that can help that and help steer is also very helpful. So actually, how do you do it? So this is where auto classification comes in and can be very helpful. Sandy, did you want to take this one?
Sure. Okay. So basically, if people aren't familiar with auto classification, are we going to take them through it today? I think we are.
We take through an example of one.
Yeah. Okay. So, but for the moment, auto classification is using software to automatically determine important attributes about a file. Okay. So what that does is, Jen alluded to this earlier. She said, as long as you're doing one, you might as well do the other. Oops, Jen, we went into a funky mode. There we go.
Sorry about that.
And so you might as well, as long as if you're analyzing for, is this a record? Yes, no. If it's a record, what record class? If it's a record class, what's its disposition? As long as you're doing that, you might as well tack on there, does it contain sensitive data? Yes, no. And if it does, what kind of sensitive data? It's just a natural kind of additional analysis that tacks on so easily. And so what you kind of get at the end of the day is all of the things that are listed here are natural outcomes from a classification effort. It's not just a set of tags. It usually includes also a set of kind of rules or actioning either at present or in the future that need to be attached to the file or to the content over time. So it allows you to kind of check off all these boxes just from the effort of classifying in the first place. I don't know, Jen, if there's anything else you would want to add on this.
No, I think that's, I think that's okay.
Okay.
An example of how auto classification would work. It goes from looking at this line of information, which is usually you find in your Windows file share. You can see, the name or the date last modified or accessed and what type of document it is, but it doesn't tell you anything about that document. So what an auto classification solution can do is go through and find those information nuggets and those data facets to better and auto classify what each file is. So you'll see in this example here, it's starting to pull out, what document type is it? It's a contract. What is the effective date? Who are the parties involved? What is the term? What are the renewal terms? Are there some keywords in this document as well that it will pull out? And what auto classification does is exactly that. If I say auto classification again, shoot me, but it will auto classify the document to determine the record type, the record class, what that retention period is, how it should be handled when that retention period comes up, and of course the sensitivity class. So it will not only pull out, is this, for public consumption, is this private, but it can also pull out that information about the data facets of the personal data. And when I say that, I mean something like this, where it's going to look at a contract and it's going to start to pull out and identify that sensitive data. Well, this is PII because there are social security numbers of individuals, and it's paired with a name. and it's paired with an address and a phone number. So all of these different data facets all point to a personally identifiable information, which we should, it's active PII, it needs protection and potential redaction as well. And another example of how an auto classification solution can find things that we don't know are there is this example of what was on my file share. It was called Scott, JPG. And what it was, of course, it didn't tell me anything with the file name or the last access date, but it turns out it was a photo of my son's passport. And he's an adult now, so I'm okay to show this. But it will show you what you don't know that you have there. And with an auto classification solution, again, it will look for that. It will scan and will start to pull out that information: name, passport number, date of birth, nationality. And depending on what you want to do with that data or who has access to that data, we can also auto redact as well. So perhaps, the person who's booking your travel needs to have access to this, but the person who's doing invoicing or accounts receivable doesn't. So we can also base permissions and redaction based on the person who is looking for this data and who has access to that data. And
I'm
sorry,
sorry,
go ahead,
Jen,
Katie.
can I stop you here for a second? So
Yeah.
It's one thing if you have, someone just doing their job and they accidentally, stumble across this literally passport information, sensitive information about a minor who at the time, he's not a minor anymore. In fact, he's incredibly tall. But right, it's one thing if an employee accidentally stumbles across it, that file wasn't locked down, probably shouldn't have had it in the first place. It's quite another when we have sophisticated tools like a far-reaching enterprise search engine that has access to everything in the company, or an AI large language model trainer that is specifically hunting for information. Now, that kind of sort of accidental access is on steroids. And that is the problem with having all of this stuff kind of like landmines out in your data. It's just waiting for either the bad actor, essentially the attack, the breach. It's just waiting for the enterprise search to go blithely going, oh, how about this? Want some information on Scott? They don't make the distinction at best, or they're specifically hunting for unprotected sensitive data at worst. And so now you can see there's a big difference, again, from an accidental person banged into it to a sort of intentional full coverage scan of your data, specifically hunting for information like this. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Back to you.
Yeah. So if Scott ever wanted to issue a DSAR to an organization, we can also help with that DSAR request workflow. So usually there's some kind of capturing mechanism, web form on your site where you're going to ask the person for their first name, last name, your address, anything that you're going to pull, then ask them what they're looking for. Is this a request for disclosure or for access or for deletion? And how would you like us to get back to you? So those are some questions that you can ask someone who's asking for requests. And how that workflow would work is that we can take that right from the web form. So that search request goes automatically out to all of these different repositories that you are storing either employee data, customer data, or this access data. It can search all those locations and produce a report. Almost more importantly, it produce that exception report. So these are the things that are under legal hold that we can't delete or contain other people's information that we cannot share. And then, of course, go ahead and produce that DSAR report for the individual. So it's very handy to have kind of, not only are we thinking information governance, records management, and all the cool things that, a tool can do to manage that, but the ability to manage, privacy, access, and then of course DSAR workflows is huge because you're killing two birds with one stone. So how do you start and how to get everybody on board? So who are you going to need around the table? Certainly, you're going to start with your records or your information governance team. And probably if you have a compliance team or security team or a DLP or privacy compliance, whatever that team looks like, and you're going to want to bring in legal, you're going to want to bring in IT, you're probably going to want to bring in those business units as well, HR, finance, maybe different business lines. Because historically, every piece of content that each of these groups or the business as a whole creates has a different value to each of these groups. Records is like, I'm going to find it, I'm going to tag it, I'm going to manage it through its life cycle. Security is like, oh, I got to lock this down, or only these people can see it. And sales is, I need to access this every day because it's part of my, kind of part of my job. So if you think of each piece of content that is created, who owns that content, whose goal is most important, who owns the budget for all of this. And when in this situation, the common goal is, each group is responsible to be compliant with their mandate. So sometimes you'll see legal and records butting heads. Sometimes you'll see, security and records butting heads, because we need to delete it because it's past retention, as an example, but I really want to keep it because I like it. So in a model where everyone is thinking about content a little differently, instead of each individual content and like, I'm responsible for this, content management and data privacy can be everyone's issue, where everyone has that overall, we're thinking privacy first. We know that controls and access are for the greater good. It could be a shared resource between all of these different departments. So shared responsibility and shared cost, which is a great way to approach it. And so instead of having these kind of butting heads between departments, we have this centralized management for all content. So your needs and what you're doing might be different if you're records versus legal or versus compliance or data privacy. But all of your information is there and managed in kind of a single source of truth, which is great.
Jen, before we go on to this, we didn't make a slide on this, but this is a good time to kind of put the concept out there, which is historically records folks have kept records for essentially the mentality is, what is the maximum amount of time that I am going to keep something? In other words, when does this turn into a pumpkin and I have to get rid of it? At the stroke of midnight, I have to get rid of it. But that's sort of the last possible minute at which I'm going to retain something. So the mindset in records management usually is, what is the longest period of time that I will allow content to continue living? The whole idea in data privacy is it's the inverse of that, which is what is the barest minimum, the shortest amount of time that I need to conduct a job, and then I can get rid of this. So since those two kind of are different mentalities and can sometimes butt heads, what we recommend you do is set up a disposition window. Instead of having a single date, the way we're sort of used to in records, which is, this is the last possible date on Earth in which this file should still be around, and after that date, it should be deleted. We should also, so that's it. If you think of the window, that's when the window closes. What you also should have is like a set of bookends is, when does the window open? Under what conditions will you have to get rid of that information early, right? A DSAR comes in and someone says, I'd like you to forget about me, please. Well, it's not exactly a record, or it's not the system of record copy. We have 72 copies of this. Maybe we can get rid of most of them. So if you think about retention as, but really the disposition, the deletion, as a window of when might we start deletion and when must we finish. And both of those are a little bit squishy, because the when must we finish is going to be contingent on things like legal hold, and when must we start is going to be contingent usually on some kind of trigger, either a date trigger or an event trigger. But as long as you have those parameters in place, then you can define what they are and when you cross the boundary, either into the window or out of the window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point.
Well, we'll make a slide for that in the future.
Will, yeah. So how to stand up a data privacy program in 10 easy steps.
You want me to take that one?
They're not easy. No.
Sure. So I was hard pressed to shove it down to 5 and 5, but basically this is all you need. You need, we talked about legal basis. You need to have at least a layman's understanding of the regulations, and ideally from your legal department, or from, if you have industry associations that say this is what you must comply with. It doesn't need to be any fancier than that. And then you have to have policies that mirror those requirements. Hopefully your policies don't, are not, out of sync with the regulations. Then you're going to need executive support. So what do we mean by that? We mean high level attention. We need kind of high level promotion or cheerleading in the organization. And of course, budget. And then you're going to need tools to do the kinds of things that we showed you today, to be able to identify, what is this content? Is it sensitive? How sensitive? How long should we keep it? Is it a record? Yes or no? Where should it live? Who should have access? All of those elements are going to be either it's going to be some poor person sitting there doing that manually for 72 fields, or you're going to use a system, you're going to use a tool. And then you have to have this notion of ongoing diligence in management. We talk about this a lot at Valora. None of this information governance stuff, whether it's records retention, whether it's privacy, e-discovery, what have you, none of that is a one and done. It's always a shifting, changing, moving. At the very least, time is passing and regulations are changing, right? We've just heard about regulations coming on board every 6 months. And so there has to be an ongoing diligence and attention and an ability to adjust the tools and the policies and whatnot to account for that world, as well as the changing data itself. So that's what you need to do. And then what you will kind of have through the course of all of this is, the first thing you'll have is a data inventory. Literally, some people call it a data map. I don't actually like that term, but the inventory of what do you have, and to a much greater degree of understanding. What do you have that's sensitive? What do you have that contains social security numbers? What do you have that's past retention you shouldn't have anyway? What do you have that's under legal hold? What do you have that everybody can access and they shouldn't? So that's what I mean by a data inventory. You will have, fancy word is a taxonomy, but essentially tagging and retention criteria for all these different use cases. Some people call that a playbook, if you've heard that term. You will have, from having gone through this, what we call baseline tagging, which is every piece of content will have its attributes and metadata all tagged up so that you can use those tags like levers to do searches or reports or deletions or migrations or whatever actions it is that you're doing that week. You will be able to remove the low-hanging fruit, all that rot, all the dupes, the stuff that you shouldn't have had in the first place, the stuff that you don't want that AI engine to be looking at ever. And then you will be able to have an automated system that is not only handling records, but is privacy aware as well. In other words, you have already checked off the box of data minimization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Sounds great. So how actually and where do you actually start? So we always recommend starting an option to start with a pilot or a proof of concept, and start with a really compelling use case. Sometimes it's privacy, sometimes it's rot, sometimes it's good old-fashioned records management and retention. But find that use case that's going to get people's attention and prove that ROI really quickly. One client we had kind of set a baseline to say, when there's a request, knowledge management request, or something similar to a DSAR, how long does it take us as an IG team to find that information? And they benchmarked it over the course of 2 or 3 months. And Sandy, I think it was 3 weeks to find, to fulfill that data request. And now it takes them 3 seconds. And then it comes up. So find a really good, compelling use case, and always have an eye to what's coming up in future use cases. So if you start maybe with rot and you're going to move into data privacy or move into records, or start with data privacy and then move into records, there's so many different ways and use cases that you can leverage here. So always kind of think to the future, what else can I do, and what else can we be helpful here for? It's certainly measure results. So benchmark your results. What's the accuracy of things? Is the reporting useful? Is the disposition working well? Measure those results so you can build that ROI and then build on those successes. So prove the ROI, then have your eye to where are we going next, build those expand in those business use cases for the business groups, and then spread the word. Sharing is caring. And if you've got another department that hears of what you're doing, you'll quickly get other people around the table. You'll get more support. You may get shared budget for things like this. So design pilots that are going to kind of highlight the importance of other use cases and other groups as well. Cool, cool, cool. How long is that going to take? Well, it entirely depends, doesn't it? So of course it depends. So we're talking about, between weeks or months, but we're not talking years. So it really depends on how much data do you have? How many systems are we talking about? Are we talking about 2 terabytes of data? Are we talking about 200 terabytes of data? So of course, you didn't create the data overnight. You're not going to scan it overnight, but we can kind of prioritize, take it in bite-sized chunks. So it depends on what your complexity is, what your goals are. Are we just looking for PII, or are we kind of going to build on those different use cases? And of course, the amount of data. Smaller organizations with less data takes quicker for them to kind of get through all of their data. But it shouldn't take more than a few weeks or certainly 2 months to kind of get up and running. And what we usually recommend is this phased implementation of doing that. So first we start with planning to really understand your organization, your priorities, your goals, and help us together set those KPIs so that we can manage and measure the success. And then we'll get into a pilot or a proof of concept. And rather than, scan 200 terabytes, we're going to take a little subset of data. In that limited data set, we can do all of the things that we need to do to show you how it would work in your large data environment. But make sure that you're seeing what you need to see, that you're getting the results that you need to get, and then go into a full-scale implementation where we look at all the different repositories and the different groups and the business units to scan all enterprise content. And then, as Sandy mentioned, then that Delta monitoring. We scan today and it's out of date the next day because everyone's creating new content every day. So that ability to go back and look for new content or anything that's been edited and apply those new rules and retentions and privacy tags to that content is extremely important because we want to make sure that we are always up to date. We're confident that we're always up to date and in compliance with those regulations. Sandy, do you have anything to add there?
I do have one thing, which is we only just lightly touched on the whole AI thing here today. And I'm not talking about AI in the kind of service of performing these actions. That's one thing. I'm talking about AI in your organizations, AI being sort of unleashed on all of your enterprise data. We have several webinars coming up because it's such a big topic. It's such a big risk. And it is so easy to control with AutoClassification. So we devoted not 1, but 2 webinars coming up to this topic. So if you want more on that, this was really about data privacy, but AI is like right there butting up next to it. I highly recommend you come to those as well.
Yeah, totally. Totally. We have about 5 minutes left and I see a question and I'm not entirely sure if everybody can see the question that's in the Q&A. So I'm just going to read it out so that we know what that question is. So someone asked, how do we balance in practice the need to destroy personal data, often requested by clients when the matter is over, with the records destruction per the firm retention schedule? Per the schedule, we are to retain records for 10 years. While clients do respect our schedule in outside counsel guidelines or the engagement letters, they still send requests to destroy PII data once the matter is over. So how to practically destroy PII without destroying other records?
So I have a couple of thoughts to that. The first one is I think that there needs to be some sort of escalation policy to just say, well, this is a record, we keep it for 10, years, la, 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 no circumstances. I think that's a bit naive and hopeful. That's clearly not the reality of what the client is thinking. And there's a little bit of sort of who's driving, right? And I think that there needs to be built in this escalation policy of, okay, so when a client makes a request that is, antithetical to our established policy, we're going to take it to the escalation board and we're going to have that out. Or we're going to weigh, the number of requests to remove the data against, policy, or who's asking. Is some random person in your client asking, or is the CEO of your client asking? So having this kind of escalation, almost like a scoring of those circumstances, I think can help. And having a team, a senior team, clearly you're from a law firm, a senior team in your law firm who adjudicates those situations, let's say maybe once a quarter or something like that. That's one way to solve it. The other way to solve it is to actually edit the content. Yes, this is a record, but maybe you want to keep a redacted copy of that instead of the original copy. Or maybe you want to make the redacted copy the one that's available to most of the people in your firm and the unredacted only to the senior partner on the matter. Or maybe you get rid of that one entirely. So this notion of anonymizing data or redacting data because you need to or you want to maintain it for this time frame, you can retain it in this safer, more protected manner that maybe the client would be comfortable with, because you could come back and say, well, we're going to keep it for 10 years, but we're going to redact out all the sensitive information here. You can see what we've redacted, something like that. So that's my alternative approach.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I'll just leave it open for any other questions. We've only got 2 minutes left, so if you do have a question, please feel free to type it in. And if we don't have time to get to it, we'll certainly reply afterwards. But I did want to thank everyone for attending today. We had a great turnout, so thanks for attending. Again, everyone will get a copy of the slide deck and a copy of the video as well. And I encourage you to check us out online, book a demo if you'd like to see this in a little more detail, or maybe a brainstorming session just to throw some ideas around on about how this could work for you. And we'll see you next time. And any questions, please let us know. Thanks, everybody.